Rumor says the fastest way to lose a badge is to mistake integrity for weakness, but Officer Daniel Mercer had never believed that until the morning he chose the wrong woman to frame. Dawn settled over Westbridge with a gray sky and a light drizzle that left the streets shining beneath rows of aging street lamps. Patrol cars rolled in one after another, tires whispering across the wet pavement as officers prepared for what many believed would be an ordinary shift. Inside headquarters, conversations drifted through the hallways about the arrival of a new police captain. No photographs had been shared, no formal introduction had taken place, and curiosity mixed with quiet speculation as everyone wondered who would soon be leading the department. Across the parking lot, a dark blue sedan eased into a visitor space. Behind the wheel sat Maya Brooks, a composed black woman whose calm expression revealed almost nothing about the responsibility resting on her shoulders. She stepped out wearing a simple navy jacket, dark slacks, and comfortable shoes, carrying only a leather folder and a small notebook. To anyone watching, she looked like another professional stopping by city offices before work. That illusion suited her perfectly. Maya had requested to arrive early without ceremony because she wanted to observe the department before anyone knew who she was. She believed the truest measure of character appeared when people thought no one important was watching. She paused for a brief moment, letting the cool morning air settle around her, then quietly studied the building that would soon become her command. Officers walked past without offering more than a passing glance. Most barely noticed her. One man, however, noticed immediately. Officer Daniel Mercer leaned against his patrol vehicle with the confidence of someone who believed years of experience placed him above questions. His polished badge reflected the pale morning light while his eyes remained fixed on Maya. Instead of seeing a visitor, he convinced himself he saw someone who did not belong. Bias filled the empty spaces where facts should have been. He watched as Maya crossed the lot with measured steps, her posture steady and her attention focused on the entrance. She never hurried, never appeared intimidated, and never searched for approval from anyone around her. Somehow that quiet confidence irritated him more than any argument could have. Daniel exchanged a knowing glance with another officer before slipping away toward the evidence building. Minutes later, he emerged carrying a sealed evidence pouch, turning it over briefly in his hands before hiding it beneath his rain jacket. No one seemed to notice, or so he believed. High above the parking area, a security camera continued its silent recording while another pair of observant eyes followed his movements from an upstairs office window. Sergeant Elena Ruiz frowned slightly, but said nothing. She simply remembered the exact time displayed on the digital clock beside her desk. Outside, Maya reached her sedan once more after realizing she had left her notebook inside. As she unlocked the driver's door, Daniel approached with an easy smile that never reached his eyes. "Ma'am," he called politely, "would you mind waiting here for just a moment?" Maya turned calmly toward him, studying his expression without speaking. Somewhere beyond the rain, the headquarters clock struck 8, and without realizing it, Daniel Mercer had already taken the first irreversible step toward the biggest mistake of his career. Daniel Mercer stopped a few feet from Maya with the practiced confidence of a veteran officer who expected immediate compliance. His smile remained polite, but his voice carried the unmistakable weight of authority. "Good morning, ma'am. We have a few routine questions before you enter the building." Maya met his gaze without hesitation. "Of course, officer. How can I help you?" Her calm answer somehow unsettled him. Most people became nervous when confronted by a uniform. She did not. She simply waited, patient enough to let silence become uncomfortable for someone else. Daniel glanced briefly toward the headquarters entrance before looking back at her sedan. "Would you mind opening your vehicle?" he asked. "There has been a report involving restricted property in this area." Maya nodded once. "If that is department procedure, I will cooperate." She unlocked the doors and stepped aside without protest. Daniel slowly examined the interior while another officer wandered closer, pretending to organize equipment inside his patrol car while quietly observing the encounter. A few employees arriving for work began watching from the sidewalk, sensing that something unusual was unfolding. Maya folded her hands in front of her and remained completely still. She did not interrupt. She did not argue. She simply watched every movement with careful attention. Daniel opened the rear door, glanced beneath the seats, then moved toward the trunk. For the briefest moment, satisfaction crossed his face before he quickly hid it behind professional seriousness. He lifted the trunk lid and reached inside. Seconds later, he raised a sealed evidence pouch into the morning air. Several nearby officers exchanged surprised looks. Daniel slowly turned toward Maya. "Would you care to explain why department evidence is inside your vehicle?" The parking lot grew unusually quiet. Rain tapped softly against the pavement while distant traffic faded into the background. Maya looked directly at the evidence pouch before returning her eyes to Daniel. "May I see the seal number?" she asked calmly. Daniel appeared surprised by the request. "That is not your concern." Maya did not change her expression. "Actually, every properly documented piece of evidence should have a traceable seal number. I simply asked to see it." Daniel ignored the question. Instead, he motioned for another officer to step closer. "Please witness the recovery of suspected department property." Pins immediately appeared. Notes began filling incident forms. Cameras from nearby security poles continued recording every quiet second. Above them, Sergeant Elena Ruiz stood near the second-floor window. Something about the situation felt wrong. She remembered seeing Daniel leave the evidence storage room only minutes earlier, even though he had not been assigned to evidence duty that morning. Her eyes drifted toward the digital timestamp displayed beside the hallway camera monitor. 8:12. She quietly wrote the time inside her notebook. Outside, Daniel continued speaking with growing confidence. "You understand this discovery raises serious questions." Maya answered in the same steady tone she had used since the conversation began. "Questions should always be followed by facts." One young officer shifted uneasily after hearing those words. They sounded less like a defense and more like advice from someone accustomed to leading investigations. Daniel either failed to notice or chose to ignore it. He believed the evidence pouch had already decided the story. What he did not realize was that Maya had carefully observed the condition of the security cameras, the exact position of every witness, the names displayed on every nearby badge, and even the tiny identification number printed across the evidence seal. While Daniel believed he was building a case against a stranger, Maya silently began building a timeline that would eventually reveal far more than anyone standing in that parking lot expected. The quiet tension spread beyond the parking lot and into the front lobby as word of the unexpected discovery traveled faster than the morning briefing ever could. Officers exchanged uncertain glances while civilian employees paused their conversations just long enough to watch through the glass entrance. Maya Brooks remained exactly where she was, composed despite becoming the center of attention. She neither defended herself nor challenged anyone around her. Instead, she seemed to be listening to details that no one else considered important. The sound of footsteps across wet concrete. The clicking of camera shutters mounted beneath the roofline. The precise wording Daniel Mercer chose every time he spoke. "Please remain here while we complete our report," Daniel said with growing confidence. Maya gave a slight nod. "I have nowhere else to be." Her answer sounded almost unusual. Most people facing public suspicion would have rushed to explain themselves. Maya simply waited, allowing everyone else to reveal their character through their own choices. Daniel interpreted her silence as surrender. He believed the evidence pouch had already settled every question. "Record that the property was recovered from the trunk," he instructed another officer. "Recovered at 8:14 in the morning." The younger officer hesitated before writing. "Should we verify the evidence log first?" Daniel answered without looking at him. "That will happen later. Finish the report." Those words did not escape Maya's attention. Neither did the uncomfortable expression crossing the younger officer's face. Procedure mattered. Sequence mattered. Every decision created a record, and every record eventually told a story. Inside headquarters, Sergeant Elena Ruiz quietly walked toward the evidence office. She greeted the civilian technician on duty and casually asked whether anyone had signed out evidence that morning. The technician scanned the computer screen before shaking his head. "Not officially. Everything should still be accounted for until inventory begins." Elena thanked him without another word, but the answer lingered in her mind. She remembered seeing Daniel leaving that very room only minutes before the confrontation began. Something no longer fit together. Outside, Daniel requested identification. Maya reached into her jacket slowly and produced only a driver's license. She intentionally left the leather credential wallet in her briefcase inside the sedan. Daniel glanced at the license, then handed it back with little interest. To him, her name meant nothing. He never noticed that the address belonged to another county, the same county where the city's administrative headquarters had recently completed an executive transfer. Instead, he focused entirely on proving his own version of events. Rain continued falling in a gentle rhythm while several patrol units pulled into the lot for the morning shift. More witnesses quietly gathered. Some looked at Maya with curiosity. Others looked at Daniel with confidence born from years of trusting his judgment. Maya noticed every face. She noticed who rushed to conclusions and who waited for facts. That distinction mattered more than anyone realized. Daniel folded his arms. You understand this situation may prevent you from entering the building today. Maya looked toward the entrance where employees continued arriving beneath the American flag moving softly in the breeze. Sometimes, she answered calmly. The most important meetings begin outside the building. Daniel dismissed the remark with a faint smile, convinced she was trying to sound clever. Yet on the second floor, Elena had already opened the digital security archive. One timestamp matched the moment she remembered seeing Daniel leave the evidence room. Another camera covered the parking lot from a different angle. She leaned closer to the monitor, her expression slowly changing as separate pieces began connecting into one unmistakable timeline. Down below, Daniel believed he was minutes away from being congratulated for uncovering misconduct. He never imagined that the cameras surrounding him had been documenting something entirely different from the story he intended to tell. Sergeant Elena Ruiz watched the security footage once, then immediately played it again, this time slowing the recording frame by frame. The hallway camera clearly showed Officer Daniel Mercer entering the evidence room several minutes before the incident in the parking lot. Moments later, he walked back out, adjusting his rain jacket as though concealing something beneath it. There was no authorized evidence transfer recorded in the system during that period. Elena felt a quiet uneasiness settle over her. She had worked in internal standards long enough to know that facts often whispered before they ever shouted. She picked up the office telephone and calmly asked the evidence technician to preserve every camera file from that morning. "Do not overwrite anything," she said. "I want every angle saved." Down in the parking lot, Daniel continued speaking with growing confidence as more employees gathered near the entrance. He believed the attention validated his actions. "This is exactly why procedures exist," he announced loudly enough for nearby officers to hear. "Nobody is above the rules." Maya listened without interrupting. Her eyes drifted briefly toward the security cameras mounted above the building before returning to Daniel. "I agree," she replied. "Procedures protect honest officers just as much as the public." Several people exchanged uncertain glances. Her answer sounded less like someone defending herself and more like someone teaching a lesson. Daniel dismissed the comment with a faint smile. "You have a great deal of confidence for someone standing in this situation," Maya answered gently. "Confidence should come from truth, not circumstances." The words lingered in the damp morning air. Even the younger officer holding the incident report hesitated before writing another line. He quietly reread what he had already documented, noticing that certain times no longer seemed consistent with the sequence of events unfolding before him. Daniel, however, remained focused on controlling the narrative. He instructed another officer to notify the duty lieutenant that suspected department property had been recovered from a civilian vehicle. Within minutes, the message reached the administrative offices upstairs, where staff members preparing the morning leadership briefing paused in confusion. The timing could not have been worse. The department had scheduled an official welcome for its new police captain in less than 30 minutes. Chief Robert Hale was already reviewing orientation materials in the conference room, while administrative assistants finished arranging nameplates and briefing folders. None of them realized that the person they were waiting to welcome was standing quietly outside beneath the steady rain. Elena left the security office carrying a small notebook filled with times, observations, and camera numbers. As she walked toward the parking lot, she noticed Maya standing with remarkable patience despite becoming the subject of growing speculation. Their eyes met for only a second. Maya offered nothing more than a respectful nod. Elena returned it instinctively, sensing a quiet professionalism that felt strangely familiar. She could not explain why, but something about the woman's calm presence reminded her of experienced command staff she had served under years before. Daniel stepped forward once again. Until this matter is resolved, I cannot allow you inside headquarters. Maya looked toward the glass entrance where employees continued arriving for the ceremony. That decision may become more complicated than you expect, she said softly. Daniel smiled with complete certainty. I doubt that. At that exact moment, inside the conference room, Chief Robert Hale glanced at the clock and asked his assistant a simple question. Has Captain Maya Brooks arrived yet? The assistant checked the lobby monitor, frowned slightly, and replied, No, sir. At least, I do not believe she has. Neither of them realized that the department's newest leader had already arrived, and that the greatest test of leadership that morning had begun long before anyone planned to welcome her through the front doors. The rain finally began to ease, leaving tiny drops clinging to patrol cars and reflecting the flashing amber lights mounted above the headquarters entrance. Time continued moving forward, but the atmosphere remained frozen as though everyone sensed they were standing in the middle of a story that had not yet revealed its ending. Officer Daniel Mercer glanced at his watch with quiet satisfaction. The longer Maya Brooks remained outside, the more convinced he became that his version of events would become the official record. Around him, conversations grew softer. Some officers whispered that the recovered evidence would surely lead to an investigation. Others simply watched Maya, puzzled by the remarkable calm she maintained despite the growing attention. She never raised her voice. She never demanded special treatment. Instead, she carefully observed every person present, almost as though she were conducting an evaluation rather than enduring one. Sergeant Elena Ruiz stepped into the parking lot carrying her notebook. She approached Daniel with measured professionalism. Daniel, I need the evidence pouch for verification before any additional paperwork is completed. Daniel frowned slightly before handing it over. Elena rotated the sealed package in her hands, reading every printed marking without saying a word. Then she looked toward the younger officer who had been writing the incident report. Did anyone verify this seal number against the evidence inventory before documenting recovery? The young officer hesitated. No, Sergeant. Officer Mercer instructed me to complete the report first. Elena nodded thoughtfully. Thank you. She wrote the seal number beside the camera timestamps already recorded in her notebook. The sequence immediately caught her attention. The inventory log showed the same evidence package had been entered into storage less than an hour earlier. According to department procedure, no officer should have possessed it without a documented transfer. Daniel noticed the direction of her questions and attempted to redirect the conversation. The important issue is where it was found. Elena answered calmly. The important issue is every step that explains how it arrived there. Maya quietly watched the exchange without interruption. She recognized something changing in the atmosphere. Confidence had begun shifting from assumption toward verification. One by one, officers who had initially accepted Daniel's conclusions now looked toward Elena instead. Facts were beginning to replace impressions. Inside headquarters, administrative staff searched conference rooms, hallways, and reception areas for the department's incoming police captain. Chief Robert Hale checked his schedule again before asking his assistant to call the contact number listed in the personnel file. The call did not go unanswered. Instead, a cell phone resting inside Maya's sedan vibrated softly on the front seat, visible through the windshield. Maya noticed the screen illuminate, but made no attempt to retrieve it. She simply allowed it to ring until it stopped. Daniel never noticed. Elena did. Her eyes followed the sound before returning to Maya with growing curiosity. Why would someone under investigation ignore a call arriving precisely when the department expected its new commanding officer? Before Elena could ask another question, a city administrative vehicle turned into the parking lot and stopped near the entrance. The human resources director stepped out carrying a leather portfolio and looked around with visible confusion. Chief Hale asked me to welcome Captain Brooks, she said to the nearest employee. Has she arrived yet? Silence spread through the crowd. Maya slowly lifted her eyes toward the woman, but remained exactly where she stood. Daniel folded his arms, completely unaware that the answer to that question was standing only a few feet away. He believed he was guarding the entrance from a suspect. In reality, he had unknowingly prevented the highest-ranking officer present from walking through the front doors of her own department, and with every passing second, the truth moved one step closer to revealing itself. The human resources director paused near the entrance, scanning every face in the parking lot with growing uncertainty. She checked the folder in her hands, looked back toward the headquarters doors, then spoke again. Chief Hale is waiting. The welcoming meeting should have started 5 minutes ago. Daniel Mercer answered before anyone else could respond. The new captain has not arrived yet. We are handling an active investigation. The director nodded politely but continued searching the crowd as though something did not feel right. Maya Brooks remained silent, allowing the moment to unfold naturally. She had learned long ago that truth became far more powerful when people discovered it themselves instead of having it announced for them. Sergeant Elena Ruiz stepped closer to Maya, holding the notebook that now contained camera numbers, timestamps, and the evidence seal information. "Ma'am," Elena asked respectfully, "would you mind telling me why you requested to see the seal number before anything else?" Maya smiled gently. "Because evidence always tells two stories. One is where someone claims it was found. The other is how it actually traveled there." Elena considered the answer carefully. It sounded less like speculation and more like the voice of someone who had spent years teaching investigative procedure. Before she could ask another question, her department radio crackled to life. "Sergeant Ruiz, please report to conference room A immediately. Chief Hale is requesting a status update on the arrival of Captain Brooks." Elena acknowledged the call but did not move. Instead, she looked from Maya to the Human Resources Director and then toward Daniel. The pieces were almost connected, but one final confirmation still remained. Inside headquarters, Chief Robert Hale stood near the conference table surrounded by command staff who had gathered to welcome their newest leader. An empty chair waited at the head of the table beside a neatly arranged nameplate that read Captain Maya Brooks. Hale glanced toward the hallway once more before turning to his assistant. "Call her again." The assistant dialed the number. Outside, Maya's phone illuminated for the second time inside her sedan. This time several people noticed. The Human Resources Director looked through the windshield, recognized the name displayed on the incoming call notification, and slowly raised her eyes toward Maya. Her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. She took 2 careful steps forward. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "May I ask your name?" Maya answered with the same calm voice she had used all morning. "Maya Brooks." The director blinked once, then looked down at the personnel folder in her hands before looking back again. "Captain, Maya Brooks." Maya gave a small nod. The surrounding conversation stopped instantly. Even the sound of light rain seemed to disappear beneath the sudden silence. Daniel frowned, clearly convinced there had been some misunderstanding. "That cannot be correct," he said. "She has been under investigation since she arrived." The Human Resources Director stared at him in astonishment. "Officer Mercer," she replied carefully. "This is the officer you were instructed to welcome this morning." No one moved. The younger patrol officer slowly lowered his clipboard. Elena closed her notebook without taking her eyes off Daniel. Every assumption that had shaped the morning began collapsing under a single undeniable fact. Maya still did not raise her voice. She simply looked toward headquarters, then back at the officers gathered around her. "I requested an unannounced arrival," she said softly. "I wanted my first day to begin with observation instead of introductions." Daniel felt the certainty that had carried him through the morning begin slipping away. While across the parking lot, Chief Robert Hale stepped through the front doors, unaware that the most important leadership lesson of the day had already unfolded before the official welcome had even begun. Chief Robert Hale stepped into the parking lot with the steady confidence of a leader expecting to welcome a respected colleague, but the unusual silence immediately told him something had gone terribly wrong. Conversations had stopped. Officers who normally stood at ease now remained frozen in place. Even the Human Resources Director lowered her folder without speaking. Hale followed every pair of eyes until his gaze settled on Maya Brooks. A warm smile crossed his face despite the confusion surrounding her. "Captain Brooks," he said as he walked forward, extending his hand. "Welcome to Westbridge Police Department. I apologize for keeping you waiting." Maya shook his hand politely. "Thank you, Chief. It has been a very informative morning." Those words carried more meaning than almost anyone present understood. Daniel Mercer stared in disbelief. He looked from Maya to Chief Hale, then toward the Human Resources Director as though expecting someone to correct an impossible misunderstanding. No correction came. Instead, The chief noticed the sealed evidence pouch resting in Sergeant Elena Ruiz's hands and the unfinished incident report still clutched by the younger patrol officer. His expression gradually changed. "Can someone explain why my new captain is standing in the parking lot instead of joining the command meeting?" The silence lasted several long seconds before Daniel finally answered. "Chief, we recovered department evidence from her vehicle. I believed it required immediate investigation." Hill did not respond immediately. He turned toward Maya instead. "Captain Brooks, would you like to explain what happened?" Maya remained composed. "I would rather the facts explain it, Chief." She looked briefly toward Elena. "Sergeant Ruiz has already begun collecting them." Elena stepped forward with quiet confidence. "Chief, there are several procedural concerns that should be reviewed before any conclusions are reached. The evidence seal was never verified before documentation began. The inventory system shows no authorized transfer. Security footage records Officer Mercer entering the evidence room shortly before the reported discovery. Additional camera angles have been preserved. Every sentence seemed to remove another layer of certainty from Daniel's story. The younger patrol officer slowly handed Chief Hale the unfinished report. "Sir," he admitted honestly, "I questioned the timeline earlier, but I completed the initial notes because I was instructed to continue." Hale accepted the clipboard without criticism. He carefully reviewed the times written on the report before comparing them with Elena's notebook. They did not align. He raised his eyes toward Daniel. "Did you sign evidence out this morning?" Daniel hesitated for the first time. "No, Chief, but—" Hale calmly interrupted. "Did anyone authorize you to remove property from evidence storage?" Another pause followed. Several officers quietly exchanged uneasy glances. Maya remained completely silent, offering neither accusation nor satisfaction. She simply allowed every answer to arrive on its own. The Human Resources Director finally spoke. "Chief, Captain Brooks specifically requested an unannounced arrival because she wanted to observe department culture before assuming command." Hale slowly nodded as the significance of the morning settled over him. What had appeared to be an isolated incident now looked very different. It had become an unexpected test of judgment, professionalism, and integrity. Daniel lowered his eyes for the first time that day. The confidence that had guided every decision since sunrise had disappeared, replaced by the uncomfortable realization that assumptions had carried him further than evidence ever had. Around the parking lot, officers who had quietly watched events unfold began seeing the morning through an entirely different lens. Maya had never needed to announce her authority because true leadership had already revealed itself through patience, restraint, and respect for the truth, while every unnecessary decision made in haste had quietly recorded itself for everyone else to see. Chief Robert Hale asked everyone to move into the main briefing room, but the atmosphere inside felt nothing like the welcoming ceremony that had been planned only minutes earlier. The polished conference table remained prepared for introductions, yet every chair now represented a witness to an unexpected lesson about leadership and accountability. Maya Brooks took the seat reserved for the new captain without a trace of triumph. She had not earned the position by embarrassing others, and she had no intention of beginning her first day that way. Chief Hale remained standing at the front of the room beside the large display monitor. "Before this meeting continues," he said calmly, "we will review the facts in the exact order they occurred." Sergeant Elena Ruiz connected the security recordings to the screen. The first video showed Daniel Mercer entering the evidence room early that morning. A timestamp appeared in the upper corner. The next recording captured him leaving only moments later, adjusting his rain jacket before walking toward the parking lot. Another camera displayed the evidence storage door, confirming that no authorized transfer had been logged during that period. The final recording overlooked the parking area. Without sound, everyone watched Daniel approach Maya's vehicle before the later search that resulted in the reported discovery. The room remained completely silent. Nobody rushed to conclusions anymore. The videos spoke with a clarity that required no dramatic explanation. Chief Hale turned toward the evidence technician. "Please confirm the inventory record." The technician opened the electronic log on the conference screen. The evidence pouch remained assigned to secure storage throughout the morning. There is no documented release, no transport authorization, and no officer signature removing it from inventory. Hale nodded once before looking toward the younger patrol officer who had begun the original report. Did you personally witness the evidence inside the vehicle before Officer Mercer opened the trunk? The young officer answered honestly. No, Chief. I arrived after the search had already begun. Another important piece quietly settled into place. Maya remained attentive but never interrupted. She allowed each witness to complete every answer without pressure or accusation. Daniel finally spoke, though his confidence had almost completely disappeared. Chief, I believed I was acting in the department's best interest. Maya looked at him with steady professionalism rather than anger. Intent should never replace procedure, she said quietly. Every officer deserves investigations built on verified facts instead of assumptions. The statement filled the room with thoughtful silence because it applied to everyone present, not only to Daniel. Chief Hale closed the incident folder and placed both hands on the conference table. Effective immediately, Officer Mercer is relieved of investigative duties pending a formal administrative review. Sergeant Ruiz will oversee preservation of every report, recording, and evidence log connected to today's events. No one celebrated the announcement. The room understood that accountability was never something to enjoy. It was simply necessary for public trust to survive. Maya slowly stood and looked around the table, meeting the eyes of officers who only an hour earlier had viewed her as a stranger. This department does not become stronger because mistakes never happen, she said. It becomes stronger when people choose honesty after mistakes are discovered. Several officers lowered their eyes in quiet reflection. Others nodded almost imperceptibly. The welcoming ceremony they had expected had transformed into something far more meaningful. Instead of hearing promises about leadership, they had witnessed leadership demonstrated through patience, fairness, and unwavering respect for the truth, proving that genuine authority never needed to raise its voice because evidence, integrity, and character always carried farther than assumptions ever could. Several weeks passed. Yet the events of that rainy morning continued shaping conversations throughout the Westbridge Police Department in ways no policy manual ever could. The administrative review moved forward through established procedures, guided by documented evidence, recorded timelines, and verified testimony rather than assumptions. Every decision followed the same principle Captain Maya Brooks had demonstrated on her first day: facts first, conclusions second. Officers who had once accepted quick judgments without question now paused before making difficult decisions, remembering how easily confidence could outrun truth. Inside headquarters, small changes gradually transformed the culture. Roll call meetings began with short discussions about professionalism, procedural integrity, and the responsibility every officer carried when representing both the badge and the community. Sergeant Elena Ruiz was asked to lead additional training on evidence handling and investigative accountability, using anonymous case studies to reinforce the importance of following every step correctly. The younger patrol officer who had hesitated before completing the original report later admitted that speaking honestly during the review had been the hardest decision of his career. Captain Brooks thanked him privately. Integrity often feels uncomfortable in the moment, she told him, but it becomes the foundation everyone depends on later. Those words stayed with him long after the conversation ended. Chief Robert Hale watched the department slowly regain confidence, not because mistakes had disappeared, but because people had become more willing to acknowledge them before they grew into larger problems. Trust inside the building began strengthening one careful decision at a time. Community meetings also changed. Captain Brooks encouraged officers to spend more time listening than speaking, reminding them that respect could never be demanded simply because someone wore a uniform. It had to be earned through fairness, consistency, and humility every single day. Residents who attended those meetings noticed the difference. Conversations that once ended in frustration gradually became opportunities to rebuild confidence between officers and the neighborhoods they served. Daniel Mercer rarely spoke during the administrative process. The certainty that had defined his actions that morning had been replaced by quiet reflection. For perhaps the first time in many years, he understood that authority without accountability was only an illusion. Every choice made in haste eventually met the patience of documented truth. On one quiet afternoon, Captain Brooks walked through the same parking lot where her first day had unexpectedly begun. The pavement was dry now, the skies were clear, and officers greeted one another with a professionalism that felt noticeably different from only a few weeks earlier. She paused beneath the same security camera that had silently recorded every critical moment. It had never taken sides. It had never spoken. It had simply preserved the truth until people were willing to see it. Maya looked toward the headquarters entrance before continuing inside, knowing that leadership was never measured by the authority printed on an office door or the rank displayed on a uniform. It was measured by the willingness to protect fairness even when doing so required patience, restraint, and courage. The badge could open a door, but only character determined what happened after someone walked through it. And as another ordinary shift quietly began, the officers of Westbridge carried with them a lesson that would outlast any investigation, because the strongest form of justice was never built on fear, power, or appearances. It was built on the simple decision to let truth speak before judgment, proving that a badge could identify an officer, but only integrity could define one.